Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mountain Lake Journal. I'm Tom Hallett. Canadians headed to the polls this week for the provincial election in Quebec, where voters overwhelmingly chose to re-elect Premier Francois Legault and his CAQ party for another 4 years.
When I say that Quebecers form a great nation, I mean all Quebecers, from all regions, of all ages, of all origins. I'm going to be the premier of all Quebecers.
Francois Legault and the CAQ will remain in power after a campaign that was at times divisive over Quebec nationalism and immigration.
There's one thing that I would put clearly tonight. In Quebec, every party, every leader are in favor of immigration. Contrary to what we see elsewhere, here, there's no party that rejects the newcomers. Here, every party considers that immigration is a richness, and the integration to our beautiful nation, it's a gift that is a mutual gift that we're making.
And with us now is Jean-Francois Godbout, who is a political science professor at the University of Montreal. Welcome. It's good to see you. We appreciate you being here.
Hello.
Francois Legault says he's been given a second mandate by voters this week after the provincial election. Is he right?
Well, it's an impressive score considering that he managed to increase, as an incumbent, increase his vote share from 37% in 2018 to 41% in this election. And also given that, also increased his seat share from 74 seats to 90 seats. So from these indicators, you can say, oh, yes, it is an impressive results, and he's done well. But we have to remember that increase in seat share is artificial because it's based on our voting system, which is the same as the one in the United States, the first past the post electoral system. However, we have, as maybe some of your viewers know, as much as 5 parties now competing at the provincial level. So the vote is divided, and whoever comes up ahead gets a huge bonus. And that's what happened to Mr. Legault. However, because he's increased his vote share, I think can be considered to be a successful campaign on his part.
Were you surprised by that vote share, by the margin of his victory, that they got 40% of the vote with 5 parties competing?
Well, we have a lot of survey data in Quebec throughout the campaign, and his scores were around 40%. So, and he was, his popularity level, his government popularity level was actually much higher during the pandemic. He handled the pandemic, at least the first year of the pandemic, with a lot of broad support across the Quebec population. So no, I'm not surprised that he managed to improve his score a little bit. It would have been surprising if he had lost ground compared to the previous election in 2018.
And what were some of the big issues in the provincial election this year? Inflation, like here in the U.S., was the economy number one for a lot of voters?
Well, the most pressing issues for voters in Quebec right now, and it's been like that for many years now, is healthcare, the economy, the inflation, education. These are issues that are universally, considered by voters to be important. Yet, no real radical proposition, except perhaps the more extreme parties were trying to, propose different ways of handling these important issues. The environment is another important issue, but once again, there wasn't any drastic proposal on the part of Legault's team on that front. Some are concerned with the level of tax and productivity, but really what was the main issue in my view of the campaign, which is not a very important issue for the voters, but that it was discussed at length during the campaign, is the question of work shortage of employees, immigration, and also tied to that is the status of the French language in the province, the decline of the number of French speaker. As we know from the last census, it's been declining, since basically almost Confederation gradually, but now we're getting into the territories where some people are really worried that French is losing ground. And so these are the issues that were discussed at length. So immigration, work shortage, and the French language, protecting the French language.
And for Francois Legault, immigration proved to be a little bit of a problem during the campaign. He had a couple of missteps, a couple of things that he said about immigration and that his immigration minister said about immigrants.
He made some unfortunate comments about the Minister Boulet, for instance. The immigration minister said that most immigrants in Montreal do not speak French and they don't work, and like some really facts that are not representative of reality at all. And you would think that comments coming in from the Legault's government, his minister of immigration, that could just certainly upset people, but yet his support remained stable, and it ties. We can tie this back to who is supporting the CAQ, and are there people that are worried about the status of the French language, worried about having too many immigrants in the province, not because they are prejudiced, just because they want to make sure that they integrate well and that they learn French, so they're not in favor of having a large number of immigrants each year.
The other four parties all polled about 15%. They all got about 15% of the popular voter in that vicinity. The Liberals actually ended up in fourth place. Was that a surprise that they lost that much support? They lost that much popular vote and that many seats in the National Assembly?
We sort of knew that they were heading into trouble territory leading in the campaign because of the different polls. It is definitely a surprise considering that this is the worst score that the Liberals have since Confederation. This is the oldest party since 1867 that's been Liberal around in Quebec. It's still the official opposition, right? It still has 21 of members of the Legislative Assembly out of 125, which is the total. But you are right, their vote share has gone down from 41% in 2014, which is what the government has right now, to 24% 4 years later, 25%, and now to 14% in 2022. So it is a steep decline. And so what's going on, right? So how can we explain such a result? Well, part of the answer has to do with the sovereignty debate in Quebec. As you know, maybe your viewers are aware, for the last 40 years in Quebec, since the 1960s and 70s, there's been a question as whether Quebec should stay within Canada or go on its own and form its own nation. We had two referendums on secession, one in 1980 and one in 1995. And after the 1995 referendum, this project of secession has sort of lost ground, and a lot of people have lost interest in the project. And this project was spearheaded by the Parti Québécois, which is another party that's having trouble at the polls. And the Liberal parties are also being sort of left behind because for a long time they were just perceived as the party that was against secession. That was their main policy views. They were a center-right party against secession, against the Parti Québécois, which was a center-left party in favor of secession. But now that this issue is not as important anymore, people are wondering, well, what's the project of the Liberal Party? What are they putting to the table? Because the CAQ is a nationalist party, but it's also a federalist party. They do not want to secede. They do not want, like the Parti Québécois, they're not in favor of leaving Canada, but they are in favor of bringing in more powers from Ottawa, a different form of nationalists to protect the language and the culture. So they have a project, a conservative project, but it is a project, whereas the Liberals now are a little bit in shambles because they weren't able to sort of present a project now that this, like as I mentioned, the debate over sovereignty is not as salient anymore. And increasingly, this party is perceived to be a party of Anglophones centered in Montreal. That's get supports from immigrant voters, first-generation immigrants, or English-speaking people from Quebec, and so that's why they have this core. Now they're to about 14%, which more or less represents the number of non-speaker. Ironically, it's around the number of non-French speakers you have in the province, give or take a few percent.
And how are the relations between the province and the United States now that the border has reopened for the most part and things are getting back to normal there? Are there any major issues between the province and the United States?
Still today, now that the borders reopen, we have to remember that 70% of Quebec's export go towards the United States. So it's a major, the main economic partner of Quebec. So the United States will always be front and center for as a policy objective to foster friendship and trade. Moving forward, Legault has highlighted that he would want to develop another dam to produce more electricity. That was discussed during the campaign. So we could see the exportation of electricity being an important issue. There's also the question of building a tunnel around Quebec City that could bring, some business from the United States expertise to Quebec. This is going to be a multi-billion-dollar project if it's adopted. There's also the issue of border security. From a listener from New York State, they may be familiar with the Roxham Way, which is a road that undocumented immigrants can use to cross over to Canada from the United States. And it's a point of entry to Canada for refugees and immigrants, as I mentioned. During the campaign, the issue of immigration was discussed at length, and one of the topic that was discussed by Mr. Legault and his entourage was to shape up perhaps the security of the border in Quebec. Some people are worried about the number of immigrant crossing at that border, so that may become an issue.
Jean-Francois Godbout, thank you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.